Now let's consider the camshaft and cam bearings, their removal and replacement. Inspect the camshaft carefully. Examine the journals for signs of wear, pits, grooves, or scoring. If any of these conditions are severe, the camshaft must be replaced, along with its mating surfaces. We'll cover only the 4 replaceable camshaft bearings in the 2.3-liter OHC cylinder head. First, inspect the bearings visually and by touch for signs of wear or damage. If the wear is excessive, or if there is damage, the bearings will have to be replaced. Bearings are not serviced, they are replaced. Use a cam bearing replacer to remove the worn or damaged bearings. Check the camshaft bores for size using a telescoping gauge and an outside micrometer. Then check for roundness. If any of these measurements exceed the specified limits, you will have to replace the head. To install the new camshaft bearing, use the cam bearing replacer. Make sure the oil supply feed hole in the bearing lines up with the oil supply hole in the head. Now let's move on to cover another aspect of cylinder head service: reworking or replacing valve guides. Valve guides are of 2 types: integral valve guides, which may be repaired by reaming and installing inserts, and insert valve guides, which are repaired by replacing the inserts. This must be done at a machine shop, since it's necessary to heat the head. As mentioned earlier, if the valve stem to valve guide clearance is not within specifications, the valve guide may either have to be repaired or replaced, depending upon the valve guide type. With integral valve guides, the job requires a valve guide reamer, a cutting tool that removes material from the inside diameter of the valve guide so that it will accept an oversized stem. Always use the reamers in sequence, the smallest first, then the next largest, and so on, so as not to overload the reamer. Follow the instructions in the reamer kit. Also available is a valve guide service kit for drilling out the integral valve guide in order to install a valve guide replacement. Drill out the worn valve guide. Then insert the new guide using a hammer and the installing tool. Here's an important point. If you have reamed or replaced valve guides, then you must reface the valve seat to ensure that the valve face contacts the seat squarely. This is a grinding operation, as is the operation performed to assure that the valve face is at the correct angle. With any such grinding operation, it's necessary to dress the grinding wheels to true them up. A wheel dressing machine is used to dress or true up a valve seat grinding wheel. It is a device with a diamond tip holding fixture that dresses the wheel. To dress a valve face grinding wheel, you use the diamond holder that's located on the machine. You should periodically redress the wheel during a valve face grinding operation. For the proper procedure in dressing grinding wheels, consult the instructions that come with the equipment. Before moving on to valve seat and valve face grinding, let's consider the valve seat. There are 2 types of valve seats: the integral type, which is machined into the cylinder head casting, and the insert type, which is a steel ring pressed into a recess cut into the cylinder head. When an integral valve seat is excessively burned beyond the limits of valve seat grinding, it must be cut down and an insert ring installed. If an original insert ring is loose, excessively burned, or cracked, it must be removed and replaced with an oversized insert ring. Now, let's cover valve seat insert ring replacement. First, remove the valve seat insert with a removal tool. Be careful not to damage the seat recess. Next, position the replacement insert ring into place with the beveled edge down over the recess. Then slide the driver over the pilot. use the slide hammer to drive the insert ring in. When the sound of the blows changes, you'll know that the insert has bottomed. Once the insert ring is fully seated, peen the cylinder head metal around the outside diameter of the insert. When an integral valve seat is cracked, burned, or has already been ground beyond repair, a recess can be cut into the cylinder head casting and an insert seat installed. To cut a recess into the cylinder head casting, follow the manufacturer's instructions included in the valve seat replacement kit. And now, let's move on to valve seat grinding, an operation that restores the valve seat to a smooth, correct angle surface for the valve face to seat against. Seat wheels are available in various widths and are dressed to the proper angle for valve seat grinding. For refacing valve seats, the wheel angles that are needed are 18 degrees. This wheel is used to remove material from the top of the intake and exhaust seats, cleaning up any rough edges in the area near the seat. It lowers the contact line with the valve face. 30 degrees. This wheel is used on an overhead cam cylinder head to perform the same function as the 18-degree wheel. The 45-degree wheel is used on intake and exhaust seats to provide a smooth, clean surface at the correct angle to interface with the valve. A 60-degree wheel is used for removing stock from the bottom of the seat in an overhead cam cylinder head. The 70-degree wheel on exhaust seats and the 77-degree wheel on intake seats are used to narrow the width by removing material from the bottom of the seat. After making sure the valve seats and guides are clean, select the proper size arbor for the guides and the proper angles and texture of wheels. Proceed to grind the valve seats as follows. First, push the arbor down into the guide. Make sure it's firmly wedged by turning it back and forth as you push it into position. In doing so, you prevent it from coming loose during the grinding. Then place the sleeve with the 45-degree wheel on the arbor. Make sure the wheel contacts the valve seat. Install the drive motor head into the end of the sleeve. Grind the seat for only a few seconds. Here's what's happening. Do not hold the wheel firmly against the valve seat for any length of time. Remove the motor and sleeve and inspect the seat. You're now ready to adjust the height of the contact line. This is done by removing material from the top edge of the seat. Use an 18 or 30-degree wheel if the contact line is too high. Use a 45-degree wheel if the contact line is too low. Next, use a 60-degree wheel or a 70-degree wheel for exhaust valve seats and a 77-degree wheel for intake valve seats, and grind only enough material to arrive at a seat width of 1/16 of an inch. Do not overgrind. Using a seat width scale, measure the seat width carefully, as this dimension is critical. Now, check the valve seat for true roundness. Use a valve seat runout gauge or equivalent. Set the dial on the gauge to 0. Turn the gauge slowly so that the bar travels around the seat. The dial indicates the runout. Runout should be within 0.02 of an inch or 0.05 millimeters. Repeat the procedure as a cross-check. If the runout exceeds the limits, regrind and check again. Just as important as valve seat grinding is valve face grinding. To determine if grinding is feasible, make a thorough inspection of the valve. Check the valve stem in 3 places for excessive wear. It should not exceed 0.001 of an inch or 0.025 millimeters. Inspect the tip for an even wear pattern. and the keeper grooves for wear or damage. If the stem is bent or otherwise damaged, discard the valve. Check the valve face for burning, pitting, cracks, grooves, and scoring. If the valve shows any of these conditions, discard it. However, if it can survive your critical inspection and can be refaced with sufficient valve margin, it is ready for grinding to assure an accurate fit between the valve face and the valve seat. The correct face angle on most forged valves is 44 degrees. Remember that the valve seats are ground to 45 degrees. That 1 degree difference is called the interference angle. This is a hairline contact between the valve and the top of the seat. When the valve operates, a perfect fit occurs between its face and the valve seat because of the engine's high combustion temperatures. Valve refacing must be closely coordinated with valve seat refacing so that the finished angles of the valve face and the valve seat will be to specifications and provide a compression-tight fit. Here's the step-by-step procedure for valve face grinding. Adjust the chuck assembly and line up the swivel plate with a 44-degree index line. Then lock the plate lock screw. Make sure the main switch is off. Then open the chuck and, holding the valve by the head, insert the stem into the chuck and close the chuck to the normal position. Check to make sure that the valve is positioned in the chuck so that the gripping members contact only the worn portion of the valve stem that operates in the valve guide. The valve stem should be gripped within 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the upper end of the worn stem area. The valve head will then be as close to the end of the chuck as possible. Now set the chuck valve stop. Push it forward from the rear until it is seated against the butt end of the valve stem. That operation permits you to insert like valves so that they're gripped on the same relative points on the stem. Complete instructions for readying the machine for valve grinding are contained in your shop manuals. Start the machine and bring the grinder carriage toward the valve. Adjust the coolant nozzle so that coolant is directed on top of the valve. Now bring the valve face in contact with the grinding wheel by adjusting the chuck feed hand wheel. Take light cuts, 1/1000 to 2/1000 of an inch, or 0.025 to 0.05 millimeters, and pass the wheel back and forth slowly past the valve face many times. Never take heavy or deep cuts. When the last low spot on the valve face has been removed and all dark spots disappear, stop feeding with the chuck feed hand wheel. Let the valve rotate against the stone for a few moments, then move the valve away from the stone. Remember, the valve seat must be the correct width and must contact the valve squarely near the center of the valve face. Here's how to check the valve for proper fit in the seat to assure a good seal. First, coat the valve face lightly with Prussian blue. Then set the valve in place. Apply pressure to the center of the valve and rotate it a quarter turn. Then rotate it back to its beginning position. The valve face will be free of Prussian blue at the contact line. The seat should be marked with blue around the entire circumference. If the contact line is too high, the seat must be ground with the 18-degree wheel to correct the condition. Now, once again, here's a chance to test yourself on camshaft, camshaft bearings, valve seat, and valve face service, or to review the material if necessary. Think carefully before you answer.
You bet. If it can't do the job, get a replacement. Congratulations. You'd have been red-faced if you hadn't figured that one out. Right you are. That 1 degree does make a difference. Good going. That's exactly what you do with valve spring inserts. On target. Those are the types. Keep up the good work. Correct. That's the way to seat valve keepers properly. Right on the button. Keep up the good work. You're doing great. Congratulations. That's absolutely correct. Keep it up. Bullseye. That's the right answer. Great going. Now don't let up. Pat yourself on the back. You're right again. Couldn't fool you, could we? That's correct. Congratulations. That's really using your head. You've done your homework. Now don't let up. Hang in there. You're doing just fine.
Now let's move on to consider cleaning the cylinder head and its components, an important part of cylinder head service. The cylinder head and its components must be cleaned thoroughly before reassembling. There are many methods used to clean the cylinder head and its parts. A hot tank is an excellent way if the parts are of cast iron or steel. However, never put aluminum in a hot tank because aluminum will dissolve. Also, if a hot tank is used, remove all bearings, as they will be destroyed. Clean the valve guides with a valve guide cleaning tool. Also, clean all bolt holes and make sure all oil passages are open and clean. Then wash the cylinder head and its parts in a solvent tank in order to remove oil, grease, dirt, and other deposits. Finally, wash the cylinder head with soap and water in order to remove any grinding dust that might have accumulated, as the solvent may not remove it. And then blow dry the head and all the component parts with compressed air. With cleaning accomplished, you are now ready for cylinder head assembly. This is essentially the reverse procedure of disassembly. In disassembling the cylinder head, we first remove the cam followers or rocker arms, depending on the engine and cylinder head, along with the tappets. Next, we remove the camshaft. Then we remove the valves, along with the valve springs, seals, retainers, and keepers. Once assured that you have a correct valve face to valve seat fit, and having kept the intake and exhaust valves in the order in which they were removed, let's put the valves back into the cylinder head. Installing valves. First, lubricate the valve assembly in engine oil. Then, insert the valve stem through the valve guide. Now, grease the keeper groove or grooves. And install the retainer over the valve stem. Then install the keepers and pull the retainer up over them. Now, without the valve spring in place, and while putting pressure on the retainer, measure the installed height of each valve spring. If the height is greater than specifications, you'll need to install valve spring inserts between the spring and spring pad. This is important. The valve spring installed height must be correct in order to prevent a reduction in spring tension, especially after any valve face or valve seat grinding. Now remove the keepers and the retainer so that you can install the valve seal. There are two types of valve seals. The umbrella type, which fits tightly over the valve stem with the lower end extending past the valve guide, and the positive type, which fits tightly over the valve guide. If you use a positive type, you must put a protective cap on the stem before installing the seal to prevent damage to the seal. Apply a thin film of polyethylene grease or equivalent to the valve tip. Insert the valve in its guide. Install the protective cap over the valve stem. Then install the valve seal with a valve seal installer or equivalent and remove the protective cap. Now position the valve spring inserts if needed, the valve spring and the retainer over the stem. Be sure the closed coil end of the valve spring is next to the cylinder head. With a valve spring compressor or equivalent, compress the valve spring, install the keepers in the keeper groove, and release the spring compressor. Then, to make sure the keepers seat properly in the retainers, tap the retainer lightly with a soft-faced hammer. And finally, recheck the valve spring installed height to make sure it's correct. This will ensure proper spring tension. Repeat the process for the remaining valves. Installing valves in the 2.3-liter high-swirl combustion head and in the 1.9-liter head is essentially the same procedure. Consult your shop manuals for complete details. With valves in place, we're ready to move on to installing the camshaft. Here are the step-by-step procedures. First, coat the camshaft journals with engine oil. Then lubricate the lobes with polyethylene grease or equivalent. Now guide the camshaft carefully through the bearings. Then install the camshaft rear retainer and the new camshaft seal using a front seal replacer or equivalent. Installing the camshaft in the 1.9-liter cylinder head is slightly different. Before installing the camshaft, coat the journals and thrust plate groove with engine oil and lubricate the lobes with polyethylene grease. Now install the camshaft through the rear of the cylinder head, rotating the shaft while you do so. Be very careful so as to prevent any bearing damage. Then install the camshaft thrust plate. Tighten the bolts to specifications. Install the camshaft seal. Align and install the cam sprocket over the cam key. Then install the attaching washer and bolt. Hold the camshaft firmly as you tighten the bolt to specifications. With camshafts installed, let's move on to installing cam followers and rocker arms. To install the cam followers in the 2.3-liter overhead cam cylinder head, first put the lash adjusters in the proper position. Then rotate the camshaft so that the base circle of the cam lobe faces the head. Then apply polyethylene grease or equivalent to the contact surfaces of the cam follower. Or you can dip the cam follower in engine oil. Use a valve spring compressor or equivalent to compress the valve spring in order to position the cam follower over the lash adjuster and the valve stem. Make sure the valve spring is fully compressed and released before rotating the camshaft into position for installing the next cam follower. To install the rocker arms on the 2.3-liter HSC cylinder head, position the rocker arm and fulcrum on the head. Install the fulcrum attaching bolt loosely. To install the rocker arms on the 1.9-liter cylinder head, first install the hydraulic tappets. They and all other parts should be lubricated with engine oil. Next, Install the tappet guides. After that, the tappet retainers. Now install the rocker arms with the fulcrums and the rocker arm bolts and tighten to specifications. Again, for complete details on cylinder head assembly, consult your shop manuals. Ready for another chance to test yourself on cylinder head assembly? Think carefully before you answer the questions. In summary then, we disassembled the heads. We learned about the cylinder head, what it does, and what its components do. We inspected and cleaned the head and its components. We removed and installed the cylinder head components. We removed and installed the cylinder head components. We removed and installed the cylinder head components. Valve face and valve seat grinding operations. Valve face and valve seat grinding operations. Some important valve face and valve seat grinding operations. We covered some important valve face and valve. We covered some important valve face and valve seat. We covered some important valve face and valves. Covered some important valve face and valve components. We covered some improved and installed the cylinder head components. We removed and installed the cylinder head component and its components. We removed and installed. We covered some all service. The kind of quality cylinder head service. The kind of cylinder heads. Reliable response owner's demand. Season after season.